Standard leather-bound Bibles present a single sealed narrative, an absolute package delivered from antiquity without a missing page. The reality is a curated anthology, a fact that became a public scandal in 1947 when Bedouin shepherds discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls hidden in these desert caves. For decades after the discovery, a small team of Orthodox scholars maintained a monopoly on these manuscripts. They refused access to outsiders, ensuring only a specific, approved interpretation reached the public. They protected the Church's version of history from insights that threatened established theological facts. If a modern committee could successfully gatekeep ancient texts for half a century, the original editors of the Bible possessed even greater power. They selected which voices were heard and which were left on the cutting room floor. The Gnostic Gospels represent the primary collection of these unauthorized voices, narratives that offered a different perspective on the life of Jesus. In the Gospel of Judas, Christianity's greatest villain is reframed as an ally. The text depicts Jesus and Judas taking a walk together to plan the betrayal, with Jesus explaining that the act is a necessary requirement for the resurrection to occur. Other purged texts focused heavily on women. The Book of Mary portrays Mary Magdalene as a primary theological teacher, someone who possessed a deeper understanding of Jesus' teachings than the male disciples. This manuscript records a direct conflict over gender. In it, the Apostle Peter openly questions why the group should listen to Mary's input simply because she is a woman. The concepts went as far as Pistis Sophia, a primordial being representing the feminine aspects of God. While she appears frequently throughout Gnostic literature, she was reduced in the final Bible to a single indirect reference to wisdom in the Book of Proverbs. Empowered women and a collaborative Judas challenged the strict hierarchy the early church needed to centralize its power. To maintain a rigid social order, these alternative perspectives had to be erased. The Old Testament cutting room floor features Lilith. Early Jewish folklore describes her as Adam's first wife, created from the same earth as Adam rather than from his rib, making them equals. Her existence helped the early rabbis solve the problem of theodicy, the challenge of explaining why a perfect God would allow infants to die or create bodies with uncontrollable functions. The rabbis utilized Lilith as a scapegoat. By transforming her into a demon who stole children in the night, they provided an explanation for tragedy that didn't require blaming the creator. The alphabet of Ben Sira records her rebellion. Lilith refused to lie beneath Adam or submit to his authority. Instead, she pronounced God's secret name and fled the Garden of Eden. Lilith was a useful tool for explaining evil, but her fierce independence was a liability. A woman refusing subservience was more dangerous to the patriarchal social order than the theological gaps she was meant to fill. The Book of Enoch was an ancient blockbuster, a vivid, universe-building epic that ultimately proved too wild to be contained within the official Bible. It provided a terrifyingly detailed map of the afterlife. It describes the abyss of the damned, a place of eternal darkness and fire, prepared specifically for fallen angels and unrepentant sinners. Despite its eventual removal, canonical authors like Jude directly quoted Enoch's prophecies in their own New Testament letters, treating the text as a respected spiritual authority. By the 4th century, church leaders faced a dilemma. Unauthorized Gnostic sects were using Enoch's specific visions of angels and demons to validate their own rival doctrines. Because these rival groups were weaponizing the text to justify unorthodox teachings, the church omitted Enoch to ensure a unified, controllable message. The book was cut to protect the institution, regardless of its popularity among early believers. Institutional control of the narrative has its limits. The Gnostic Gospels were pulled from the sand at Nag Hammadi, the Dead Sea Scrolls were eventually released to the public, and the myths of Enoch and Lilith have persisted in cultural mysticism. Acknowledging the reality of this cutting room floor reveals the Bible as a collaborative, human editorial process, rather than a static document. These deleted texts show that early believers were critical thinkers, wrestling with the nature of evil, the role of gender, and the structure of the cosmos. Only by reading the texts removed from the official record do we see the full editorial history of the Judeo-Christian tradition.